Navy SEALs Hell Week is a grueling 5.5-day training program that is designed to push candidates to their physical and mental limits. The program is part of the SEALs Basic Underwater Demolition Training, which is considered one of the toughest military training programs in the entire world. During Hell Week, candidates are subjected to extreme physical and mental challenges, including continuous physical training, cold water immersion, sleep deprivation, and intense psychological stress. And we're led to believe that those who can endure this ordeal do so because they're the mentally toughest people on the planet. That they're able to ignore pain, they quit bitching, they silence their emotions, and they show no weakness. Well, that's actually a load of bullshit. In the age of Instagram alpha mentality, we think of these elite soldiers as extremely strong and stoic, that nothing whatsoever phases them. But research shows that when put through extreme stress, 96% of soldiers experience dissociative symptoms. Think of those scenes in war movies, where a soldier is on the front line and he's surrounded by endless gunfire and explosions. There's a moment where everything just blurs away. All of those noises are muffled, time slows down, and they're just staring into the abyss. That's what dissociation is. You zone out, you become detached from yourself and the task at hand. You do this because your brain and body is just overwhelmed beyond belief. They're basically shutting down because of the fear and panic that you're experiencing. The vast majority of soldiers who experience combat will go through this, and they describe it as terrifying. In those moments, they're scared and anxious. They're not fearless and stoic. And that's the same during Hell Week. It's brutal. For 5 days you're on edge, both physically and mentally. But here's the thing, Hell Week is actually a test that comes after countless hours and weeks of training. Navy SEALs and all other branches of military spend more time in classrooms than on the Hell Week beaches to prepare themselves for such grueling tests. Mental toughness is not about throwing someone into the deep end of the most testing trials and challenges and just seeing who can handle it. Because if the military did this, then no one would pass. Instead, you educate your personnel on a range of mental skills so they're able to get through these incredibly stressful experiences. For example, the US Air Force has a 652-page operations manual for their SIR training. This covers everything from psychological aspects of survival to knowledge of medicine, methods of camouflage, and firemaking. The psychological section includes how to handle boredom, loneliness, hopelessness, and losing the will to survive. These are all skills that need to be trained so that cadets can deal with pretty much anything that they'll face. Without training like this, the pass rate for Hell Week would be 0%. Mental toughness is not about sucking it up and remaining emotionless. In contrast, it's about accepting the many thoughts and feelings you have, many of which tell you to quit and how scary something is. But you're then able to use skills to cope. For too long, we falsely interpreted things like Hell Week, that in order to toughen people up, you put them through the most testing of challenges. You see this with authoritarian sports coaches, who on the first day of practice runs everyone into the ground until they throw up, or they make their athletes do countless repetitions until they collapse. This is seen as something to be applauded, but all it actually does is cause injury, sickness, and people's development to stutter. Research shows that stress inoculation, which is what the likes of Hell Week is, doesn't work unless you've acquired the skills to navigate the environment you will encounter. And those who do pass Hell Week are not those who have just made themselves immune to discomfort. They've just figured out ways to maintain focus and clarity during those times of chaos. Negative thoughts of wanting to quit in these situations is what every cadet feels. And that doesn't necessarily make you weak, it just signals that your brain is trying to protect you. But through mental toughness training, the mind becomes better at handling uncertainty so that you can nudge your response in the right direction and endure the pain and fear that you're experiencing. So what is true mental toughness if it's not about just cancelling out your emotions and ignoring the pain? Well, let's run through 3 things I took away from Steve Magness' book, Do Hard Things, that will teach you what mental toughness really is and how you can practically build it. There's no shortage of alpha bros on the internet telling us that in order to succeed, you need to remain stoic and emotionless. That true mental toughness is about eliminating any negative emotion or feeling and remaining laser focused on your goals. Again, this is bullshit. Research into people with damage to the ventromedial prefrontal cortex are incredibly poor at making decisions. And this is the part of the brain critical for emotional processing, meaning these people with damage to it are often able to properly feel emotions, both good and bad. And the result of this is these people in their everyday lives find it incredibly difficult to make the most basic of decisions, and so their professional lives as well as their relationships suffer dramatically. Feelings and emotions, when it comes down to it, are just signals and messages that something is different and requires our attention. Listening to them tells us important information, whether this is feeling nervous before a big presentation or feeling anguish after a painful defeat. It's important to acknowledge these so that we can then take the necessary course of action. Think of the 2 greatest footballers of our generation, Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi. Both have suffered heartbreaking defeats in international cup finals, and both have cried their eyes out in those moments. Feeling this pain allowed them to both remain focused on getting better, continually seeking to improve so that they could avoid that pain again. And both of them went on to win international trophies in future. If you don't feel your emotions, you don't change. And if you don't change, you don't grow. If you just try to bury or bulldoze through your emotion, then you often misinterpret how demanding a situation it's actually going to be. And then obviously this actually increases your chances of failure because you've not taken the necessary steps to address your feelings. Another misconception about mental toughness is just about sucking up all pain and just blindly pushing through fatigue, particularly during physical activity. But here's the thing, it's actually tougher to take a day off than it is to train. True mental toughness comes in actually listening to your body deeply so that you're aware of, okay, when are the times to actually push on and when are the times to take your foot off the gas? The idea that pain is for the weak is just plain stupid. What research has shown time and time again is that elite athletes are not immune to pain. They don't ignore it and they don't even try to fight it. They actually learn to fully understand the full spectrum of pain. For example, top runners don't try to distract themselves when experiencing discomfort during a race. They actually zoom in and pay more attention to it so they can fully assess the situation. They become experts in understanding whether pain is just a signal that they're pushing themselves to their limits and that it's something that could be sustained, or that the pain is an alarm signal that something is seriously wrong and that they need to stop. True mental toughness is about feeling pain and accepting it. It's not about ignoring it. In a study at the University of Wisconsin, 2 groups of participants had a hot probe placed on their skin. The first group were people who had practiced over 10,000 hours of meditation in their lifetime, compared to the second group with no experience of meditation. Both groups on average actually rated this pain around the same, about a 7 out of 10. But the interesting thing was that those without meditation practice rated this pain as twice as unpleasant as the meditators. Meditation is about accepting all thoughts, feelings, and emotions as they come, basically becoming aware of all sensations. So the meditators in this case didn't actually feel any less pain than the other group. They were just much better at accepting it and tolerating it, meaning they didn't find it as unpleasant. It's often the case that the more you try to fight the pain or try to ignore it, often the worse it becomes, which is what the old school model of mental toughness has pushed onto people. But in actually embracing pain and listening to it, you develop true mental toughness so that you can fully understand it and learn how to best deal with it, which in some cases may be to carry on, and in other cases it may be to stop, to avoid injury or serious long-term damage. Pain doesn't necessarily make you weak, actually feeling it often makes you tougher. And one final lie about mental toughness is that you're supposed to just ignore your thoughts. But again, the more you try to fight those thoughts, often the stronger they become. Our brain continues to force them to the forefront of our mind, meaning we use up more and more of our dwindling mental energy, and this often has a negative impact on our ability to perform at whatever we're in the middle of. And because of this lie, as a society, we've actually become scared to listen to our own thoughts. One study by Timothy Wilson placed individuals in a room with nothing but a chair, a table, and a button on it. And they were simply told that if they pushed this button, they would receive an electric shock. The researchers then said they would come back to collect the participants shortly. The choice they had was simple: embrace the boredom and be alone with their thoughts for a few minutes, or kill time by inflicting pain on themselves by pushing the button. And what they found was that 67% of men and 25% of women inflicted pain on themselves by pushing the button, instead of just sitting there contemplating their thoughts for 15 minutes. And what this shows to me is that the majority of men are actually mentally weak. The fact we can't even sit with our own thoughts is a serious problem. For decades, men have not been allowed to express their thoughts and emotions, and we see this often has devastating consequences, with suicide being the leading cause of death for men under the age of 50 in the UK. The problem with just ignoring and suppressing your thoughts is that in the long run, this just backfires. Those thoughts just come back stronger, and after you've ground yourself down trying to ignore them, you're far more vulnerable to the negative spiral they can cause. But research is increasingly showing that opening ourselves up to discomfort makes us better at dealing with it. Accepting your thoughts creates space. It allows the sensation you're feeling to either just float away, or for you to reframe it and do something about it. You'll still feel discomfort, but you don't end up freaking out about it, and you don't end up feeling worse than when you do trying to fight it. True mental toughness is not about powering through, it's actually about processing through. In other words, it's not about pushing away your thoughts, it's about making adjustments to address them or overcome them. So what are you meant to do now to become more mentally tough after learning what true mental toughness is? Well, firstly, it's simply about getting into a better habit of listening to your body, your thoughts, and your emotions. It's about growing comfortable with accepting all of these things and no longer just trying to ignore or suppress them. Remember, we all feel pain, we all feel discomfort, and none of us are able to kid our brains and bodies otherwise. We can only grow comfortable with being uncomfortable in fully accepting all of these sensations. But then you also want to develop the coping skills that expert military personnel learn so they can do the toughest things imaginable. These include goal setting, positive visualization, self-talk, meditation, and reappraising stressors. And these are all things I've made previous videos on, which I've just reorganized into a new 25 video playlist. So check these out here so that you can start becoming the most mentally tough version of yourself.